How's it going, everyone? This is Barrett with Portafilter. It's been a minute since I've done a video. Been really busy selling some Portakeepers to y'all, and just my day-to-day job keeps me really busy. So I've been wanting to do the wrap-up comparison between these two grinders. I've been using the DF64 Turn Solo and the Niche Zero for quite a while now, a couple months. And it's just time to, I think, declare a winner. So I don't know if you guys saw this, but I can't believe James Hoffmann did me like this. I've been calling the DF64 the niche killer for a couple months. I've even been saying it in some of my hashtags. And then his first video comes out and it says the niche killer with a question mark. So, well, here, let's just show this real quick. There you go, James. The niche killer. So today I want to discuss the aspects of each of these grinders, give pros and cons to each, tell you which one I like, and we're just going to go from there. Both grinders are consumer grade, single disc grinders designed to be used in a home kitchen. So that means they're not NSF certified to use in like an espresso shop or something like that. So they're not, neither of them are pro grade. These are NSF certified, so you could use those in a shop. They're the big grinders. So let's start with price. This one starts about $450, $500. I think the MSRP is like $6 on it, but I really don't see it much more than that. If you got in on the early bird with the espresso outlet, he was selling for like $250. It's just crazy. So pretty inexpensive, but you're not getting a piece of junk like some grinders. This one here, the Niche, I've seen it. I think on their website it says like 500 pounds or euros or whatever they sell in. And I did the Google equivalent of it, and it's about 560 US dollars. But you have to ship it and pay importation fees. So the last time I looked, it was like $675, $700. So we're looking at like $400 to $650, let's say $700. So the Niche is, I think, considerably more expensive. I've heard a lot of people say, like, even if you put like the couple $100 SSP burrs into this, it still costs less than a Niche to import. We're going to go into that a little bit more later, but the DF64 definitely a little bit cheaper. Both grinders are in great demand. If any of you have tried to buy a Niche, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's been out for a couple years. Every time they drop a batch, they're sold out. They're sold out so fast. So there is a lot of hype behind them, and that sells them. I think the DF64, it's brand new to the US. It's been on the market. A lot of people don't realize this. This thing's actually been out there for a little while, and people have been using it overseas, but it just hasn't gained that popularity. And someone finally just found it one day, and now everyone wants them. So it's not just been mass produced, but it's getting to that point where I think it's gonna be like Niche, where you might start waiting for these a little bit more. People are already waiting on these because the manufacturer's not really tooled up to make just tons of them, but we'll see what happens. So now let's talk about some of the features and build construction on these grinders. And the DF64 uses these Untitled mill burrs, and I wasn't very familiar with the manufacturer of the burr, but they are essentially a Mauser Super Jolly 64mm compatible burr. And I'm going to take this apart real quick, show you guys. So they're a 64mm burr, and really nice. I mean, these are very nice burrs. The upside of the Mauser compatibility is that you can use Mauser burrs. They have like the SSP, Boit. It's kind of a small, not heard of brand, but they make some pretty premium like SSP style burrs, and you can get them in different grind profiles. So you can get like the unimodal, you can get more of the all all-around burrs like these for drip and espresso. You can get the SSP speed burrs. You can put pretty much anything that you can put in a Super Jolly, which those burrs are in more than you realize. You can put those burrs into this, no problem. So I think that's a huge plus on this. I'm going to show you this real quick. It's not really part of this, part of the burrs, but I do kind of find aligning this collar to be a bit difficult. You kind of have to press down. There we go. I heard it click. But it's definitely a little bit more difficult than like the niche. And then once you get down to the very end, it is a little bit more stiff. You don't want this thing moving around. But the upside is you don't have like a set screw or something that you're trying to retain your setting with. Which some of the older like Mauser style grinders, they had something like that. So just like the DF64, the niche also uses Mauser burrs. And the big difference here is that they're using a conical burr instead. I just had the screwdriver. Here we go. So I like to show y'all. It does come with this screwdriver. It's a 10mm screw. And you might not have to do this. Well, you do to take the burr out, but unscrew the top. And I've kind of found, grab a few fingers. You can shimmy it out. So there's the bottom burr. You can tell it's quite a bit different. It's hollow. You can see the Mauser name on the back. And the center portion, which fits in there. So there's your conical burrs. Totally different type of burr. They are a premium burr in my opinion with the Mauser, so that's a major plus. You're not getting some cheap small conical burrs. And assembling it, this part's a little bit easier to line up. I just think the way they machined it, it's just a little bit easier. So there we go. And then you have this disc. It's an anti-popcorning disc. We'll talk about that in a minute. And you screw that back down. So there's your burr comparison. I'd say the big plus is these are just kind of good out the gate, where these are also good out the gate. But if you're wanting to get a little bit crazy, go like unimodal SSP or something, you can totally do that with this where you can't with the niche. So I'm a big fan of the flat burrs. The flat burrs, I think they make a cleaner cup that's got a lot more clarity and a lot more sweetness. The conical, they're just a little bit more boring. A little bit, I say well-rounded. It's well-rounded in that nothing really stands out. You're not really pulling that, like, wow, that's got this crazy cherry or this crazy pit fruit stuff or like crazy citrus. It's just kind of there. So there's my thoughts on the burrs. The dosing cups, put this back. The dosing cups are also pretty different from each other. So the dosing cup on this is clear, and a lot of people are complaining, oh, it's so cheap, oh, it's so cheap. I kind of like it, because when you're grinding and you take your portafilter and you're going to put it on like that, you're going to flip it and give it a shake. You can kind of do side to side and get them distributed really easy. And if you look, the lip is not very deep on this. It is thicker, but it's really not that deep. So I haven't really had any problems with like ground distribution with this. I kind of like this cup so much, even if I didn't have this grinder, I would probably own one of these. The niche, you could say it's a more premium cup, which it is. It's a 58mm stainless steel cup. This is the older style. It has the ridge on the inside, which a lot of people have complained about. I think my two things that kind of annoy me with it is you can see how deep it goes. I mean, it goes almost the depth of the entire basket. And then the other thing that it's a pro and it's a con. The dosing cup itself, there is like almost no room. So if you're like putting it in at like an angle, I'm almost always hitting it. And when I lift it up in the back, I'm chipping like the paint in the back. So I wish they'd just give you like a couple more millimeters here, but like right here is probably a little bit too much, but that's really the difference between the dosing cups. If I had to choose one, I'd probably choose the clear one, despite it being much cheaper. Something that this has that the niche also doesn't have is this doubles as a portafilter fork. So you can plug the portafilter in, and it's okay. If I'm using like an on-demand grinder, this thing is designed for it. It's not adjusted for this one at the moment, but it is designed to take that portafilter and not have much of a mess. This one, it has a lot of room right here, so as you're bellowing it, it might come out, it might not. I really like doing it in the cup and kind of holding my hand over it and then shaking it and hand dosing. So although you can do it, it's not my favorite. I know they've said like, oh, it falls out. Oh, well, they have these little rubber covers that go on the fork, and mine actually came with like 4 extras, and there's 2 on it. So I have not replaced any of these. This is exactly how it came, and this has never once fallen out. It just fits in, it stays in. Not really had any issues with it. Same thing with my portafilter. This is a Rocket portafilter. Here's an aftermarket portafilter. I mean, they all stay in there, like, pretty nice. Here's another one. I'd say the downside, I don't have one in here right now, but like you have the Gaja ones, and it's going to go in at like this crazy angle. It does hold it. If you have like the Breville with the 54mm baskets, it's not going to fit. You might be able to like kind of prop the tabs, which isn't a big deal if you're trying to do it directly in. I would still probably use a dosing cup. So there's the dosing cups. The clump buster on these two. This one has 2 silicone membranes, like 1mm silicone sheet silicone pieces right here, and they have like a slit in it. And I noticed when I was using it, it does hold the grounds in until you start to bellow, which isn't necessarily a good thing. Because what's going to happen is you have your flapper wheels and you have more grounds coming out, and those grounds, as they build up, if they're not being pushed out, they're going to start grinding against each other and going a little bit finer. Since then, they've actually improved this membrane. They have a much thinner one that supposedly does not push back as hard on the beans as it grinds. So I don't have it. I have the original. I've not really had very many problems with this as is stock, but just know that they are working to improve this. There's like a ton of people doing some crazy stuff with aftermarket ones. I actually have my own idea for an aftermarket one. I just haven't done it yet. The niche, I would say historically has never had a clump buster, at least according to a couple people that I've talked to. This one actually has one metal bar that just goes through the middle where it comes out. So it's not doing much of anything in my opinion. The conical burrs themselves, they're usually a lot less clumpy because when they come out, they're a lot less fluffy. So on the flat burr, you're getting kind of this like kind of cloud-like that tamps way down. Where these, just the ground distribution, it's hard to explain. It's just the way they stack in the cup. They don't feel as fluffy to me. So, not the end of the world. This is something to point out. The adjustment, I showed the adjustment a bit ago. So, on the niche, they technically adjust the same. They technically both have a collar. The niche, it has the numbers on the body, and then this moves and has this ball bearing, and that's the setting that you're on. And with the Turin, you're actually moving the same collar, but you're moving the numbers, and you're supposed to align it up with this little line in the front, which I find kind of terrible. So the first thing I did was I made these little dial indicators. This one's not tightened right now. It has a set screw, but it has a hole in the middle that lines up with these numbers. So as you're passing by, you can see the numbers. But trying to go like one setting, yeah, you can go by feel, but having that arrow there really makes a nice improvement. So that's probably something that they missed the mark on. I feel like this is a cheap way. Portakeeper.com, they're like $12-14, and it's a huge improvement, I think. They're both infinite adjustment, so they're not a step grinder. You'll have like the Barazzas where you're like click, 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 as you adjust it. This, it's smooth. So if you're just barely going between settings, it's that infinite adjustment. So these micro adjustments are really easy to do with both of these. The niche, I docked this because of this line. The niche, this ball bearing, I think is not good in my opinion. I don't know. I don't like it. I think it's hard to see. I kind of feel like the roundness to it, it's not really like it's casting a shadow, but it's hard. Like if you're not straight on with that ball and it's like way over here, you're like, what setting is it actually on? So then you're like putting your head over here and you're like, okay, it's on 45. But from the front, it's really hard to see. Where here, you're not really having to look. It's all in the front. So I think that's a drawback to that ball bearing. I don't think that's very good. So my biggest pet peeve between these two, and the thing that I've always had an issue with the niche on, is the motors. So let's start with the DF64. I'm calling it all sorts of things. DF64, Turin, Solo, Giotto, all these different Giotto, different names. And on the motor on this, the motor is literally that big. I mean, it's huge, and it's the whole circumference. So you pretty much are buying a motor, and then they put a grind chamber on top. So this is a 120 volt AC motor. Different countries, they might be 240, I don't know. US 120 volt AC motor, and this is the entire motor. It's heavy. It's an extruded aluminum case, and it's just a huge motor. It's a huge motor for such a small grinder. On the flip side, on the niche, so the niche, I think the motor's pretty embarrassing. It has a very inexpensive motor in it. Like, you'd be shocked at how little they're paying for this motor. We're talking dollars, probably less than $10. So when I disassembled the niche in one of my videos, check it out, I was in shock. It's a cheap drill motor. It's pretty reminiscent of what they put into like a $200 Barazza. So I'm not really dogging on Barazza, but I really feel like if you're paying $700 for a grinder, it should have a little bit better of a motor in it. I mean, the motor itself's only about that big around, about that long, and it has a plastic gearbox with ball bearings in it. All the gears are plastic. I think that's been my biggest complaint about this. Yeah, okay, people say it makes a good cup of coffee, but you're way overpaying for this grinder. It's just not worth $700. I actually paid more than $700 just because I couldn't get my hands on one for these videos. So I think the motor is a huge letdown. We'll just leave it at that. So while we're talking about motors, let's talk about grind time. So this thing, it's got 64 millimeter burrs. It's pretty close to what like my Super Jolly does. About 10 to 12 seconds. Not the worst, not the best. Most people, they probably would know no different. But it's middle of the road. And that's for an 18 gram dose. So we're talking espresso here. And we're going to go over the niche. The niche, it's like at least double. So where we're like maybe 10 seconds over here, this is about a gram a second. We're at like 20 seconds for an 18 gram dose. I mean, we're not talking that much coffee here. And I've even had them go as like 25 seconds, so pretty long. Comparing that to the Atom 75 that I like, the Atom 75 or like this K30, it does it in about 4 seconds. So 18 grams, less than 4 seconds. So the 10 and 12 is doable here. This thing is driving me nuts at how slow it goes. And I'll talk about it a little bit more, but I feel like at the very end when you're trying to get the grounds out, this thing's supposed to retain 0, but I still found myself like patting it and doing all this stuff. This thing just took forever to get like 1 cup of coffee. I just kind of don't get it. So I would say that the DF64 is a little bit more superior in the way that it is faster. I don't want to wait half a minute to just grind my coffee and then wait another half a minute to brew it. And that's not even including tamping and distribution and all that stuff. So where I can usually do all that stuff with my atom within about 10 seconds, I'm spending maybe a minute and a half with my niche. That's wild. Mess. So I know that's been one thing that's been pointed out, that the DF64 is messy. I've actually done a video on it, so I've done the research and I kind of know. When you're using it on less than 30, I really don't have any mess. When I go up to, let's say 50 or 60, the chaff wants to start sticking to the body, especially when you use the bellows. So one thing that I like to do is you can use a spray bottle and you spray into the cup, or I should have brought some down. I use chopsticks, and you just kind of wet them under your sink and you stir your beans with your chopstick. This gets just the smallest amount of moisture on your beans. Then you dose it and grind it. I haven't really had any mess. So I did a comparison with and without the water added, and without, it's non-existent. So I'll call James out. He's like, oh, it's so messy. Oh, it's so messy. And he's criticizing it. Oh, it's such a mess. Oh. And then he's like, he's got his Lagom P64 or his Lynn Weber EG1 that's like over $3,000. He's over here with his little sprayer and doing all this water and stuff. And he's like, oh, this fairly inexpensive. I just can't do the water bottle on it. So I think it's kind of ridiculous. If you're worried about the mess, deal with it with a little bit of water. It's really easy to clean up. Worst case, use a brush. I usually keep these brushes around. I like paint brushes. This is a little fancier barista brush, but let's clean it up. It's not a big deal. Use some water. The niche itself is pretty mess free all around. I think my biggest issue is when I'm like kind of banging on it to get the grounds out. I mean, I'm having some come out right now and have a couple fell out. Usually what happens to me is I'll hit it, I'll kind of bump it on accident, and I'll get some grounds in this tray. The tray is removable. You can brush it off in your sink, so it's pretty easy to clean up, but I'd say less messy overall. Some of the chaff does get stuck on the top, does in this one too. So it's an espresso grinder. Espresso grinders are not clean. There is excessive amounts of chaff and stuff. I mean, if you've used a Baratza, you really know what I'm talking about, but I really don't think the DF64 is all that bad. In an earlier video, I also checked for retention, and I started by saying I didn't really know how much this thing was going to retain, especially with that membrane in there. And what I found out is this actually retained a little bit less than the niche if I use the bellows. So if you're not using the bellows, you're obviously going to retain a lot. But when I did these side by side, this has no bellows, this has the bellows. This actually had a little bit less than this. We'll say it's a wash overall. Pretty much zero retention in both. I won't say zero, it's about half a gram. I got 0.3 and 0.5 grams. So not zero, but that's pretty dang good because your average grinder is going to retain at least 1 gram. Most of them pushing 2 grams. So if retention's a thing to you, both of these are solid performers in my book. For popcorning, the DF64 definitely has some popcorning if you're not familiar with that. When it gets down to the very end, we can maybe do it real quick. It will pop some beans up. Let's turn it on. See how they're popping up? And that's without the lid on. So it does have some popcorning issues. But put your lid on. How hard is it? You should be grinding with your lid on anyway. This thing has a lid on. Grind it with your lid on. It's quieter. And then use your bellow. And you don't really have this popcorning issue. Now, I've been designing something to help with this, and we'll see how it turns out. This actually has this anti-popcorning disc on the inside, so it has this little tiny U-shaped slot, and as it spins, it just lets like 1 or 2 beans in at a time. So not much popcorning. I can't leave the lid open because it has this little button. I could probably bypass it, but they had popcorning issues in the beginning. They made this disc, and that helped fix it. You can see that the DF64 definitely has some popcorning issues, but use your dang lid. It's not that hard to put the lid on. You should have it on anyway, so I don't really buy into that it's such a big issue. So, funny part, the appearance. So, I think both of these things are ugly. They have no Italian styling. They don't look good next to my espresso machine. They're not Italian. And, I mean, I got my Ditting over here. This thing's ugly as sin, too. It's a brick. But you have, like, your K30. I mean, they're not the most attractive, but they're pretty cool looking. But at least that thing looks Italian. It's German. It looks more Italian, we'll put it that way. You have like the Mauser, they just have that real nice elegant look. These, they're just kind of dorky, they're goofy looking. So, I thought it was pretty funny. I've seen some people online, they call this DF64, in the beginning they said it looked kind of like R2-D2. And yeah, I can see that. If you've seen Mystery Science Theater, I think my favorite one is that it looks like Tom Servo. And now I can't unsee it. It has the beak. It's basically Tom Servo. So, not the most elegant. The niche, I think the favorite one that I've seen is that it's a Barbie-sized Japanese toilet. So, got the lid. I can see it. They got the crazy lines on it. So, it doesn't really fit that nice Italian look, in my opinion, neither of these. The wood on the niche, I think, is pretty ugly. I think if you had, like, I think this is birch or something, it doesn't match wood. If your kitchen's not oak, which oak's kind of more of a 90s wood, a lot of people are going with, like, cherry and mahogany and some of the darker woods, or, like, the really white woods, which it might look okay with, but I really feel like they're cornering people with oak. Where this, I think you could fit into a lot more kitchens more easily. So, not a big fan of either of these from a look standpoint. I will say it's more of a material thing instead of looks, but this is solid aluminum, or I say solid aluminum, this is cast aluminum, and then it's been painted. This is actually a piece of extruded aluminum, and it's not been painted. It's actually like a high quality vinyl wrap. So they're doing some pretty cool stuff with these. I didn't even realize that it was vinyl for a long time until I took it apart. So, really easy if you wanted to swap this out to something cool. You could put, I don't know, whatever you want. You could even put like the fake wood around this very easily. Look really good. User experience. So, I saw on Hoffmann's video that the user experience is so great on the niche and it's so terrible on this. It's not good, but it's not bad. I really don't think it's that bad of a user experience. I think my biggest complaint is where the power button is. It's down beneath the dosing cup. So if you have the dosing cup in place, it is ambidextrous. If you're left-handed, right-handed, up against a wall, up against a machine, whatever, you're not having a switch or a button on the side that's in the place, but it'd make more sense to put it up here. I know why they didn't, because there's a motor right there and a grind chamber right there, so they put it down at the bottom. That was the most economical place to put it, but a lot of people have complained about the button. I am with you. I've gotten used to it. I thought it was just stupid about the first day, and after a day I didn't even really think much about it. Just slip your hand under there, you kind of just flat palm it, hit it, on off. Not a big deal. The niche, I've always thought that this random switch on the side was pretty goofy. Now, it's the same switch that's on like my Rocket over here, but it just doesn't fit this machine at all. I don't know what would fit. Maybe just a little toggle switch or a toggle switch, having one in the middle, but that'd be where their logo is. I just feel like this is really dorky and dumb. Not a big fan of where the switches are on this. So the user experience, I really don't think from a switch standpoint, they both have their cons. This is maybe a little bit easier, but I feel like it's in the way. This is definitely more awkward to get to. For the bellows on the DF64, I really don't mind the bellows. You can do it two different ways. You can pull the whole bellow off, or you can leave the bellows in and you can pop the lid off. This lid is like a piece of machined aluminum. I have found that I like pulling the whole thing out. And that's because usually when I'm doing this, what happens is it'll slide out of my hands and it's actually falling on the floor. Try to put it in the camera. I got a couple dents. And it's a heavy piece of aluminum, so that's why it dented. And I've had better luck just leaving it in. Push it down, put it to the side, dose it, put it back in. So user experience of the bellow, I don't think is that bad. It is a little bit more awkward than maybe like a lid or like a hopper where you're taking the whole lid off. The user experience with it is, I think that I really don't like how shallow that bowl is. And then at the very end, when I'm wanting my grinder to run as I'm like kind of trying to bellow it, if you turn it on, you lift the lid, it turns itself off because it has a safety switch. So I'm like kind of patting it, trying to get my grounds to come out. There's always a lot that comes out. And then close it and maybe shake it a little bit and pat it again. So if anything, I don't think that the workflow is much worse on this over this. I think that this is a lot more cumbersome to use. It's maybe a little less carefree. Just kind of dump your stuff in and it turns on and it grinds and kind of bang on it at the end. Where this, it's like, oh, it's so hard to push this bellow. Oh, I mean, it's not that hard. Just bellow it. Grinds twice as fast as this. I just think the workflow all around. I can go from dosing to grinding, bellow, and then dosing my portafilter within probably 30 seconds. This, to me, is probably a solid minute, and I'm used to it being much faster, like 10, 12 seconds. So from a workflow standpoint, I think the DF64 wins. So my parting thoughts, I do think that the DF64 is the niche killer. Sorry to all the niche fans, but I just really like it. I have obviously a lot of nice grinders. I have a lot more not pictured. So for me to say that I really like this grinder, I think should say a lot, but y'all don't know me. So in my opinion, it really is holding its own. It has performed much better than I even expected. I was not expecting it to perform this well, especially at the price point. I'm like, man, this thing's way cheap. It's probably got cheap everything. Cheap motor, cheap burrs, like the Italmill burrs I just wasn't familiar with. So I'm like, what trash is this? Even though they're like actually quite nice and premium. Electronics seem nice on the inside. They're very minimalistic. They do have a timer, so if you were to leave this on and walk away, it's going to turn itself off after 45 seconds. This doesn't have that. So I just really like it all around. I think what's the most important for me is that the DF64 is outperforming the niche in the cup. And it's outperforming it in the espresso cup, V60 cup, Aeropress cup, go down the list. I really just prefer it all around. The niche, I've done some blind tests, and when you're looking on the graph, it's just more centralized. So it's more of a circle. And on the flat burrs, you'll have this kind of like outlier over here. It's like, oh man, this cherry and strawberry and rhubarb is like really popping on this bean, where it's much more flat on this. So I think I'm getting the complexities out of this. I'm not getting as good as like a larger like 75 or 83 millimeter burr where it's really going to bring those out, but it is doing quite well. It's going to take a little bit more to dial in to get those out. So we're talking just the smallest micro adjustments, but I like a flat burr. If you like a little bit more boring, don't have to think about it coffee, I mean the conical might be for you. So I won't say that I hate the niche. I'm glad that I got a chance to try it out, see what the hype was about. A lot of people said that you're going to like it a lot more than what you think. I really don't. I just didn't. It's not for me. I've used a lot of conical burr grinders in the past. I've used the Compact K10. I thought it made amazing espresso. It's totally different than anything that I'd ever had. It was an amazing grinder. It's pretty much the only conical burr that I've really enjoyed. I've used all sorts of Baratza conical burrs. They're a lot cheaper. They're $300, $400 for the nicer one, so not a bad grinder by any means. I think you're definitely getting your money's worth out of it. But this, I just kind of feel like it fell short in all the cups that I had. Not bad. I had a couple of V60s that were just like amazing out of this. I actually felt like my AeroPress was never that good out of this. Where out of this, I could make about anything work. I could make it do about what I wanted it to do no matter what. If I wanted it to be stronger, pull out that fruitiness. If I wanted it to pull out some of the dryness, the clarity was there. I like a cleaner cup. This Ditting has, I forget, 80 or 83 millimeter burrs, and this is like the cleanest cup of V60. Like you'll look in your filter and the filter is like clean when you're done. So this thing's making like a very clean cup. There's very few fines. It does have more fines than a much more premium grinder, but you're only paying $400, $500. So you're really getting a heck of a deal. You're getting over $1,000 Mazda Super Jolly that's much more user friendly for $400 or $500. Here, I paid more for this than MSRP, but I don't feel like I'm getting my money's worth out of it. So it's probably going to hit the market here pretty soon. So if you're interested in that, don't message me. I'm going to post it somewhere else, but let me know what you think. I'm sure a lot of niche people probably upset, but that's fine. Like I said, I'm probably not going to keep either of these. I'll probably keep this one just because I think it's a pretty cool grinder. It's nice. It's a second grinder. That might be one more thing that I'll point out about having a grinder like this. So if you started with one of these and like upgraded to something else, K30, and this is your primary day-to-day, it's your on-demand. I prefer the on-demand. And you're getting that bean on the weekend, new bean, you're like, man, I want to try this out. Or you're a roaster and you're trying out 5 different beans because you're roasting all these different profiles. Something like this is pretty sweet because you dose it, you grind it, clean it out, and you can change beans really quick. Don't put like flavored beans in there unless that's all you're using it for. But you can swap from bean to bean to bean really easy. You technically could with this, but you're going to have to single dose it. It's going to be a little bit harder to clean out. They're going to retain a little bit more, where these are going to retain a lot less. So really good second grinder or a really good first grinder, and hang on to these if you ever upgrade, because I think you're going to find yourself missing it. So really good, fairly inexpensive. Both of these are supposed to be relatively inexpensive. This one, I think the hype has the price up, but they should be about the same price in my opinion. Really good grinders, so I don't think you can go wrong with either of these. People have their opinions on flat versus conical. I'm a flat burr guy. If you like conical, that's fine, but both of them are pretty nice grinders. I would keep them both. I'm not going to keep them. I have too many grinders, but let me know what you think down in the comments. Thanks for watching.